Alright, let's continue finalizing the various panels of our car. I'd like to take a second and focus on the roof. Now, my viewport's kind of slowing down just a little bit. Not too much, but enough for me to notice while I'm spinning around here. So let me simplify some of these verts. That's a little bit better. Now, up here on the roof, we have a lot of cleanup to do, because this was, it looks pretty good for a preview. But we need to get rid of some of these normal issues here across the top, and you can see we have some tweaking to do. There's some lumpiness and bumpiness that needs to be kind of cleaned up. So for starters, we're going to get rid of that creasing for the time being, just because a bevel is going to serve us better, very much with many of the other panels we've been using here. So let's shift right mouse and grab the poly crease tool. And hold down the Shift key and click on each and every one of the creased areas. Now, you got to make sure that your poly crease tool is set to extend to selected components in order to get all these. Then middle mouse click, drag to the left to get rid of all of that creasing. Switch to your high res just to confirm. And before we even go about the process of beveling these out, let's take a moment and tweak out some of the areas of our roof, because we can already see some problems. We have a crease running in this direction. We have a crease running in this direction. Both of these need to be smoothed out before we go too much further. So I'm going to get my Move tool, and we'll grab vertices and just start spreading these out. Now notice for now I'm curve snapping. Later on, as I start looking at indentions and things like that, we'll start tweaking out. For now, just keep it simple. Now we have several vertices here along the edge, so make sure you go into wireframe view and get all of these at once. So that should help that crease, and it does. For now, we have another crease though, because of this little crease that appears here. These edges are a little bit too close together and could probably use some tweaking in their own right. Now, we know just from working with it, we don't necessarily need to have all of this topology perfectly lined up with each other. So let's go ahead and start spreading some of these out. Just curve snap these over. And we'll pull this over, like so. Go. And you'll probably get away with pulling that inwards just a little bit. And in wireframe, it looks a lot better. Let's go to smooth shading. And yeah, a few tweaks maybe aside, that looks a lot better than it did just a few minutes ago. Now, we need to go ahead and put in those bevels so that we get that nice creasing all the way around our shape so it's not over smoothed. So let's shift right mouse. Actually, we can probably get Y. Yeah, so hit the Y key and get those creases again. And hold down shift, make sure you grab all of those creases, shift right mouse again, and choose bevel edge. And your bevel is going to be small because of some of the selections you've made, which is fine. We can definitely deal with a small bevel in this case, and if we need to enlarge it, we can do that manually. Okay, for starters, though, if we switch over to our smooth, you'll probably notice some kind of odd pinching taking place up here where this crease takes place. Now, from certain distances, this may not look too bad, but we can smooth this out if we come in and grab our, well, let's go to object mode and then shift right mouse and get the split polygon tool. We'll split this straight across like so that becomes a quad. And then you can actually, if you switch over, you'll still notice a little bit of creasing. You can smooth that out if you take these vertices here at the tip, where it's going to be kind of like the bevel wraps around in a little U, and just curve snap these outward, which will stretch out the U-turn area, and that really softens that up. Okay, not too bad. Turn the smooth on the door for just a moment. We'll smooth this even though we're not really done with it, and I'll just use this kind of as a reference. I'm thinking that we could probably use a little bit more rounding down this area, because it looks just a little bit too flat. So what I'm going to do, at least for the time being, is I'm going to undo to get rid of that bevel, because I don't want to work with so many extra vertices for the time being. So I'll just back up a few times till we're no longer beveled. That'll work. Let's go to Object Mode, and I'll get the, I could probably get the Split Edge Ring Tool. Yeah, that worked out really well. Saved us a little bit of time. And you'll notice that your shape changes just a little bit, and probably looks even more flat than it did a minute ago. The cool thing is, though, that now we can come in here and grab vertices and add just a little bit of rounding and really help clean up this shape. Now let's take all of these vertices and we'll straighten those out like so. Now let's go over here back to shaded view. And what I'll do for now is just gently eyeball these. I'll just kind of pull them up a little bit, sighting down the car. I need to come back and separate these vertices here in just a bit. Just kind of make a mental note of that. Alright. And it's subtle, but it should really help things out later on. That still looks pretty smooth right there. Okay, so let's put that bevel back in. So we'll go back down and we'll grab our Poly Crease tool, hold down Shift, get all of these edges. Now, I did notice a second ago, there's probably some edges here we don't necessarily need to bevel, such as we don't need that edge or that edge. We probably will need that edge. So let's take just a moment and let's customize this just a little bit. We don't really need that edge, but we probably could use that one. I'll keep an eye on that. I may need to come back and adjust that a little bit later. We don't need these lower edges. Don't need that edge. We don't really need to select down there. It won't really do us any good anyways. These you can deselect if you want to, but they're borders, so they're not going to bevel in the first place. So I wouldn't worry about them. So now let's try beveling this. And switch over to the smooth. And actually things look really clean right in there, so that's good. And let's take just a second. And we'll put back that little split that we added over here just a moment ago. Grab vertices and we'll spread this down the tracks a little bit. So that cleans that up very nicely. And overall, the roof is looking a lot better than it did a little while ago anyways. Let's come over here to a top view. Kind of cross-reference things. Not looking too bad. We'll probably need to come up here and close in some gaps. Now, just as a bit of a side track, it would probably be a good idea if we took just a minute and smoothed out the windshield. And you can decide on your own whether or not to do this. You may not need to. In fact, I may not need to. I should probably kind of investigate the matter. The trick is this. If, based on the amount of detail you have, you may have a little bit more or less detail than I have on my windshield. If you think there's a chance that the audience will be able to notice the nickeling or the actual individual polygon faces all the way around the top of the windshield, you might want to consider smoothing it. In my case, I'm not entirely convinced just yet that they'll be able to notice that, so I don't think I'm going to worry about it. And if I decide to smooth it later on, like after I mirror the whole car over, I just think to myself, you know, that's got to be smooth or it's just not going to look right, then I'll worry about it then. So we'll leave the windshield just the way it is, but keep in mind that that may be a concern depending on how you've created your model. Now, because the door and the roof are now smooth, it's a good idea for us to take just a moment and look at making sure that the door and the roof line up accordingly down this seam. And we already noticed like a little bit of a problem up here, some minor separation. Now, because we have an extra edge here, we don't really need to do that little crease technique to pull our corner in. Our corner looks pretty good, actually. But we do need to make a few adjustments. So grab all of the vertices at the corner. We can pull these in a bit. And be sure to check your relative elevations. You'll notice that in this case the roof is popped up over the door. So we need to kind of pull that down. Put a little more separation in there. And this will just be a work in progress. Work in progress. Just walk down the side of your car and clean up the seam in between the two. Now, if you should notice, and you might notice an area where you need a little more detail, like it's possible, hard to say really, let me kind of back out. Nah, I think I'm okay. You might end up with an area like right here. It might help to have an extra edge. Don't be afraid to put one in if you think you need one. And that would be like if the smooth is just straightening out too much and starting to pass through the door. Let me put one in just as an example. Just come in here and grab the split edge ring tool, pop in a new edge, and really when you have it selected, you can probably add your little bit of rounding just by popping that up just a little bit. And now you've got some vertices over here that you can work with. So now we can adjust that, make sure that gap is butted up nicely. We can adjust relative elevations, and now move to the next section. So it's just all about if your mesh seems to be straightening up a little bit too much, you can clean that up a bit. And pull this out, clean up that little gap. I'm just hitting those arrow keys. You can probably hear it coming over the speakers. Right. Whoops, went the wrong way. Now, I'm not going to worry about cleaning up the gap in between these two pieces right now. This piece is yet to be finalized, so I'll come back to that a little bit later. Over here, probably going to be a good time to maybe do a few tweaks. Looks like we may have some very slight denting right here. It would be a little hard to say, really. So hard to say that I don't think I'll stress about it too much. Maybe this piece could come up. This is where you can just kind of kick back and be a little nitpicky. Looks like could bring this up. Yeah, it looks a lot better. Skip that one, maybe tug this one up. You'll start to notice patterns that you can follow real easily once you get to a certain point. Is it just me, or is that whole area kind of dipping in? It really looks like it is. If you want, and I don't recommend you do this and leave it, but what you can do is you can go ahead and mirror this polygon just as a test. So if you shift right mouse, you can go down to mirror polygon, -X, select your poly mirror and set your merge threshold down to something very small. Now in this case, you'll notice that we didn't have all of our vertices lined up, so we need to probably undo that. Let's click on the x-axis, and we'll grid snap holding the X key and just middle mouse gesture, and that should clean everybody up. Now, let's do that again. So, right mouse, mirror polygon, negative X, boom. Take that poly mirror node, set its threshold down to something very small. And this will help you see things like dents. Like you can see now I've got a little bit of a dent here in the middle. It's a little more obvious. So if you're having a hard time making those out, just remember that you can do this. So I'll undo. I kind of saw them there to begin with, but I wanted to give you guys sort of a way in case you have a problem making them out for any reason whatsoever. Now one of the ways to fix this is to take each of the vertices at the central axis, and you can snap them in Y to their next door neighbor. So point snap, make sure you didn't click on somebody you weren't supposed to, and then make sure they're just pulled up a little bit. Because you don't mind a little bit of upward doming, it's just when you dent in you start to have problems. So you can test all of them that way, or like in my case, I know that that's dented in. So we'll just kind of pull these up a little bit. Also, if you don't want to stress about it too much right now, keep in mind that after you mirror, it's a good idea to go through a final tweak phase, or right before you mirror, actually both. You know, do once before and after. So we'll probably be doing something very similar, where we'll have like some last-minute tweaks right before we mirror things over. And then once we get mirrored, we'll grab all of these central pieces that have been mirrored themselves. Things like the roof, things like the hood, the front bumper, anything where two pieces have been duplicated and merged together to form one single new piece. We will take some time and look at those to make sure that if there are any tweaks that need to be made to those, that they are made indeed. Alright, so let's go back to object mode, take a look at our high res. Things are looking sharp all in through here. A little bit falling off as we come back in this general direction, but that's okay, because we need to finalize this piece and then we'll start matching all of that up. So, one thing at a time, they say. Now, I could be nuts, but I think I'm noticing some denting in this area here, and it's probably due to these vertices. It's going to be a little tricky to see. A lot of these you'll only notice at a certain distance. Like if I back out to here, it becomes a little more obvious. And maybe earlier when I was pulling out these rounding verts, I kind of got a little bit carried away on a couple of them, which could cause that. Actually, that one little bit I just did helped out quite a lot. Now, I'm thinking that the next area, the next dent, is taking place right in here. So, I'll gently pull these up just a little bit. That looks a lot cleaner from back here. Okay, let's pay attention to what's going on up here across the front of the car. Or across the front of the hood, the roof anyways. Alright, one row of vertices at a time here. Double check in the top view. It looks like the roof actually needs to be pulled forward to meet the existing windshield geometry. So that's the way we'll handle this. We'll pull forward in X, like so. It looks like as far as relative elevations are concerned, I'd probably get away with pulling this up. And it's really more or less just to catch a highlight across this panel, not really for any other reason. Because I imagine that on the real automobile, these pieces are going to fit together really, really well. I mean, come on, it's a Lamborghini. Alright, and yeah, let's pull these guys down just a little bit. Now make sure that didn't put any nasty dents in what you've been working on so far. And seeing just a little bit of a dent in through here, maybe something very small, probably virtually imperceptible, but alright, now let's double check with the top view. Yeah, we'll bring these vertices on the roof forward as opposed to bringing the windshield back. Okay. Excuse me there. And let's see, looking good up through here. We could probably take the corner of the windshield, though, and pull it down a little bit, because it is sticking up beyond the door. That's a minor problem. We still have this corner, which is separating a little bit. And we can pull it over a little, and that will help things out. Also, it's going to be a good idea to grab the windshield and actually tuck it in just a little, just to help things out. Now, again, we're starting to see some separation in what the windshield is doing, so it may be a good idea. I know I talked about it earlier and had at that time decided not to. It may be a good idea to go ahead and smooth out the windshield. Now, we know from past experience when we smooth out the window that this will cause the corners to be rounded out. So what we're going to do real quick, the same thing we did before, is grab our split edge ring tool, and we'll put extra edges at the far ends of the geometry. So, like so. And actually, we should probably set this over to relative. I believe it's a little closer to absolute. Let's go to object mode. Yeah, we'll set it over to relative. And there we go. So with that, if we select the object, hit Control tilde, we get a nice smooth version of it, which we can now test out and see how that lines up. Much more smoothly all the way across. Can probably grab this vertex and tug it up just a little bit. Ooh. It's interesting. Now let's see here. If I grab this vertex, I'm running a quick test. It looks like I might have... No, okay. I thought the connection between my smooth and my low res was destroyed there for a minute. Just make sure I haven't completely lost my mind. There we go. Don't know what was happening there, but as long as it's not doing it now, that's fine with me. So we'll pull that over. Probably tug that up just a little bit. Might be a good idea to have another edge of detail over here, because the windshield stays pretty flat most of the way across, but then gets a little more rounded here toward the edges. So it would make sense if we wanted to add some more detail here toward the end of the windshield. So we'll just use the split edge ring tool, split down the middle, grab this new edge and tug it up just a little bit. Actually, won't even do that because I don't want to move some of the verts down there at the bottom. Okay. Actually, maybe pulling these forward in Z might be a little more of a subtle way to create that rounding we're looking for. Alright. So it's looking sharp. We could also, just for sake of argument and cleanliness, whatever, go ahead and add blend 1 to our windshield temporarily. That way we can see a reflection. Or if you want to get fancy, you can assign, was it Fong 1? Is that the one that was transparent? Yeah. So have a little bit of transparency there. I'm going to take just a second, though. That's just a little too transparent. I need to remember that the thing is there, so we'll bleed back a little bit on that transparency, just for the time being. So there's a window for you, and we can do the same thing over here. So now your windows are starting to look and behave like windows. How cool that must be. And I think that moves us over here to this next piece of the roof. Yeah, I can't think of anything else we really need to do up there for now. So let's grab this piece, and again, the creasing at the corners is just a little too dramatic for us in this case. So we'll grab the poly crease tool, grab all of these, middle mouse, drag to the left to cancel out that creasing. So there's a confirmation that all of that has gone away. And with those edges selected, we'll just bevel and give a quick test. And really, things almost immediately look just right. A few tweaks aside, it looks pretty good. So let's start grabbing some vertices. It looks like we've got some relative elevations we need to clean up a little bit. A little bit of creasing that we could adjust here and there. So we'll pull this up, make sure these are at very close to the same elevation. And grab the next row of vertices. Same thing. Pull back a little bit so they're not completely running through one another. And over here, continue. Got a little bit of a gap in there. Maybe I should go ahead and close that in. It's a lot better. And can't even see that one, so we'll pull this out. In fact, let's pull it out until we see a gap, just so we know what we have to work with here. And we'll pull this up. Seems to help out a lot. Let's grab all of these vertices, and we can pull these up. Now notice in the proxy mesh they are kind of running through one another. That's very common. Don't let that get to you too badly. And then over here, we'll just pull these out until we can kind of see the joint. Actually, let's pull that back a little bit, something kind of like so. Nice and rounded all the way around. Okay, so I think that's going to work for that piece. A little bit of a downward slant, which actually I don't really have a problem with. I imagine that's pretty close to the way it is on the actual car. So I think that's going to just about do it for the hood, the roof. Thought I noticed a couple of dents here. I know, and I'm like Moby Dick, man, when it comes to the dents. I think I see them, and I just go crazy, and Captain Ahab kind of thing. Okay, so I think that's going to wrap it up for the roof. I can't think of anything else to really add to it. Now, while we're back here, we could go ahead and clean up this panel, which should be a pretty quick exercise. If we take a look at it in wireframe view, it's already looking pretty good. There's a few things that we'll need, though, that we don't really have in place. We need some thickness edges to help us keep contiguous rounding at the corners, the edges of it. So let's start off by creating those, shall we? Now, let's see. Let's grab all of these edges wherever two panels are going to be meeting. And we'll simply extrude these. Go ahead and push them in Z local. And there you go. Now, I don't even know if this thing has been smoothed. I don't believe it has. So we could take care of that presently. Hit Control tilde and shift over to your smooth. Go ahead and, let's see, right mouse, materials, and drop that blend 1 on it. In fact, I know I've been so disorganized here lately, so you guys should all... everybody on the other end of the machine, boo me real quick for being sloppy. Come on, I want to hear it. Boo! Alright, I'm going to go ahead and name my materials just real quick. So, we'll call this car paint. I heard one of you not booing. Glass. And we'll call this not block, but black plastic. So, there you go. So here's our, this little piece, looking pretty good. We, of course, need to do that bevel trick that we do, so let's also make sure we bevel this piece, because it looks like it's going to need a nice, solid crease all the way down. So let's go into wireframe view so it's a little easier to see what's going on. We can grab that. We'll go ahead and bevel this corner that comes in just for good measure. We probably won't need to, but it'll keep things looking nice and neat where these edges meet one another. And we might need to clean some of these up down here. We'll get to that, though. Now, let's see. That corner and this leading corner all the way down. Whoops. And grab that corner and that corner. I think that's everybody. We could, again, just to be safe, grab this corner and this corner. Could also put a bevel here. Whoops. Down through here just for good measure. Because I think you can see the change in direction that takes place there. And if you do that, go ahead and run it all the way to the end of the surface. So grab little indented edges as well. I think that's everybody that we really need. So let's shift, right mouse, bevel edge, and have a look. Already that looks pretty sharp. Let's go ahead and push up to the second level of detail. And I am relatively pleased. Now, we have a little bit of rounding that we put in on this surface here on the roof, and we have no rounding here. Now, I don't really have a problem with being all nice and flat by the time we get back here, because I think that's more accurate to the car. But up here toward the top, we may want a little bit of rounding. So let's grab the split edge ring tool. We'll drop an edge right down through the middle of this, which will help kind of flatten this out as we go down. But up here at the very front of it, we can grab some vertices and very subtly do some adjustment. So we can pull that up so those kind of meet. We also need to make some adjustments here as well. Now I'm thinking, actually, let me back up a little bit. I'm thinking this piece of the roof might be a little bit high as compared to this. Because, you know, we've got this panel, I'm sorry, not panel, the little wing vent guy. And he's lining up pretty well with this guy, and this guy's lining up pretty well with him. So the roof, in this case, is the odd man out. So we'll select the roof and start bringing it down to match up with this piece, as opposed to the other way around. Now that does mean we could get rid of a lot of our rounding here at this stage of the game, which would probably be a little bit safer on our part. And let's see, if we pull that down, that kind of starts to line up. I'll go ahead and leave that edge that I put right down the middle of this, though, because it really did add to the flattening down that piece, and I like that. Makes me happy. Let's leave that smoothed. Let's grab vertices here and kind of just butt those smooth meshes right up against one another. Check that relative elevation, which looks pretty good because we've already kind of tweaked it. Okay. Right, looking sharp. All the way down. Nice crease running through there that I'm liking, so that definitely works for me. So yeah, I think that's going to do it. It's probably about all we can match it up to at the moment anyways. I think there's one thing we can do, and it's a little bit on the nitpicky side, but it looks like some of these vertices are sticking inward toward the center of the car just a little bit too much for my taste. Or maybe not. Maybe I'm just out of my mind. No, that's fine. I was just nuts. It just looked like it from that one angle. So that's looking pretty good. I'm pleased and happy. Let's also take a moment as we progress around cleaning up bits and pieces of the car. Let's finalize this little quarter rear window area, which, you know, it's a little bit dented, has a few areas that need better rounding and so forth. Now, I'm thinking, which I know is dangerous and I shouldn't do it quite so often, I'm thinking that if I were to delete these two little faces here inside this crevice, that it might be a good idea for me to grab, well, probably all of these edges, but I'll just start with these two for now, and extrude them straight back, pull them down a little bit, and basically extend this surface in a little more into the vent. Just because I'm seeing that on some of these pictures, like right here, you see it kind of going further into the vent, so we'll do that. Now let's go into wireframe view so I can see this piece a little bit better. I'll go over to vertices and just start making those adjustments. Now this is an area where you really don't need to sweat accuracy because, you know, the thing's hidden away. It's up inside the car. We'll pull this down a little bit because there's got to be some sort of give and take to make way for that little vent. How about you? You should be really skinny, and you are, which is good. Okay, and if I were to, for any reason, rotate this wing up, we kind of see that disappearing off into the distance. Maybe even a little bit farther would be nice, but before I do that, probably be a good idea to recreate this gap in between the two. Very easily done. Looks like all we really need to do is grab these two edges, and we can extrude them. I'll pull them straight down in Y world. Hit G, extrude them again, pull them down in Y world a second time. Go back to object mode, shift right mouse, append to polygon tool, and append across the bottom. And then all you really need to do is start snapping and merging vertices. So let's get the camera someplace where we can use it. And we'll snap, 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 and snap. Is this 10 vertices? Which become, whoa, not 1. It's a little overdoing it. Becomes 6, which is right, because there were only 6 I wanted to actually merge, or something like that. Close enough. Now, that all looks pretty good. Grab these verts, not those up there, just these, and kind of smooth out that a little bit. We could take the wing vent itself and maybe pull this back up a little bit, make a little bit more room. Not too much. Now the rest of these verts, I'm simply going to pull back a little further into the vent area. Basically extending this geometry inside just a little bit further. Try to keep it out of the way of everything else that's going on. There you go. That's far enough where I think the audience can safely forget about what's going on in there. We'll probably be sticking like a filler polygon inside of there at some point. Okay, now back over here. If we take a look at this guy in high res, looking pretty nice overall. I mean, the general structure is correct. Just some cleaning and adjustment that need to be done to kind of get them all wrapped up and finalized and happy. Now, first and foremost, we have this gap that runs across here. And everything's all nice and connected as far as that gap goes, but we have some cleanup that'll probably need to be done. I am thinking that this extra edge that I have running down the inside of this gap, it's helping me out right now, but it's going to make my job a little more difficult here in the not-so-distant future, especially if I try to bevel out a lot of what's going on in here. So what I'm going to do is get rid of those extra edges. Let me frame up on this one edge so I can see this really well. So there's one edge. There's the other. Again, we're on the inside of that little crevice that runs down this shape. Now let's go to Edit Polygons, Selection, and the Select Contiguous Edges, Delete Edge. And even that doesn't look too bad, but it is kind of starting to soften up a bit. Now, we need to create a few thickness edges in here. Now, something you can do if you think it'll help, and like I could do it just as an example, is we could temporarily get rid of this whole indention for the time being and put it back in a little bit later. That might actually help us out as far as making this whole thing very easy to create. because you'll notice we've got some extra edges running down this piece just to help us get some of this in place. And the fewer edges we have to work with right now, probably the better. So here's what we'll do. We'll switch over to faces, and I'll select all of these. And you'll notice I'm marquee selecting in through there, so I'm getting all of the faces that make up that gap. Ooh, looks like that could be straightened up a little bit, doesn't it? I just want vertices, thanks. No, vertices on this piece. Thanks again. And let's frame up on those just so I can pivot about them for a moment. So yeah, we could probably pull that up a little. And pull that up a little. And pull that up a little bit. Alright, I'll worry about the hardcore tweaks later, but some of that needed some adjustment. Alright, so now let's do shift right mouse, grab the append to polygon tool, and I'm just going to append straight across to fill in that gap. Provided that I can append. There we go. Oh, I had the caps lock key on. Watch out for that. I was trying to hit Y with caps on. Just doesn't work. Okay. So now if we look at our smooth, that crease is still kind of there because of the nature of our geometry, but the gap itself has been taken out. Now I did have one more series of edges that we should probably go ahead and clear out, and that would be these two series which run all the way down to the end of this shape. So let's go to, again, Edit Polygons, Selection. Let's grab those contiguous edges and delete those. So we've simplified this quite a bit. Should help us kind of expedite the tweaking and finalizing process. Okay, now while we have so few edges lying about, it'd probably be a good idea to tweak out some of what we have going on here. It looks like our gap sort of changes thickness a couple of times, which we should probably clean up a little bit. So I'll take the two vertices, pair at a time, and scale them together. We could also, let's see, if I grab these two, frame up on them. We could straighten that out a little bit. Straighten that out a little bit. I'm sure we'll have some tweaking to do as far as elevation's concerned in there. And we'll straighten this out a little bit. Pop these up, because I'd like a nice continuous shape of the surface here, if at all possible. That's already helping. Okay. And I don't mind it starting to kind of slope off once it gets inside a bit. It looks like that's rotated up and this one isn't. You really got to kind of love that, don't you? That's okay. We'll just get it close and we'll call it even. What we'll probably end up doing is rotating that back down, killing out our smooth, and putting in a new one. Alright, and let's get back over here, though. Now we have some denting that kind of runs down this area here, so we should have a look at that, and we can see it immediately. Let's switch our move tool over to normal mode. Also, let me take just a second and let's kill out our history because we got quite a bit of it. normal mode should help us really straighten out a lot of these vertices. Okay, double check on your smooth from time to time. Ooh, it's looking a lot better. Much, much better. Just a little denting up here. Okay. Not bad. Okay, so as we move around here, now we are at 1 level of smooth here, and everything else on the car has been 2 levels. So let's set this to 2 levels so we can get a better idea of what sort of denting we're looking at. I think maybe this vertex can be tugged out a little bit along with his immediate neighbors. Again, I'm not too worried too much about this crease. That's going to change when we put the little segmented crease in there anyways. So I guess that puts us over here at this window, which could use a little bit of assistance, getting more rounded. So what I'm going to do is grab entire rows of CVs, vertices, that control not only the crease itself, but the entire indented area. Set our move tool back over to world for now. Already that's helping quite a bit. Nice smooth curvature all the way up. Pull that up a little bit higher. Pull this one out. And it looks like we have some depth considerations. And let's switch this over to normal mode for just a moment. Wow, I opened up the attribute editor without even really trying. Are you guys all proud of me? I am. I also put a whole bunch of W's in the notes for this one object, so we can find those later. And I'll just arbitrarily scoot that around. Probably be a good idea. Well, normal mode won't work there, but world mode will. Tug these back out a little bit. Clean these two up just a tad. And then we can scoot here along the bottom and do something very similar. Keep these all nice and tidy. Okay, looking pretty nice so far. We do have some more denting here in this area that we can also clean up. Again, let's switch back over to normal mode, which is our preferred method for adjusting vertices in the middle of a mesh. I'm going to push each of these here at the indentation inward just a little bit, so I'm preparing ourselves to have a little more inward curvature. these out a little bit. Ooh, much, much nicer. Okay, looking very nice. So I guess it would be time to start worrying about the little bit of creasing we have that we need going on here. What I'm going to do is, now I'm going to try this. I'm pretty sure this is going to work out really well. It may not. I'm going to shift, right mouse, grab the split polygon tool, and split this right here at the corner. And then I'm going to grab this corner and bevel it, so you get this huge bevel that we don't really need all of. We need that to be a lot smaller. Let me slow my virtual slider down again, so wow. That helps quite a lot, actually. That corner's still a little bit questionable, but don't worry about it just yet. We still have to add some thickness edges in through there, so if we need to make tweaks to it at some point, we will. For the time being, no stress. Okay, now that's a little five-sided corner, or five-sided face. But it doesn't really seem to be doing too much damage. Not from any respectable viewing distance, anyways. What we could do, as an alternative, if I undo, probably get rid of that edge. Let's just see what were to happen if I didn't put that corner in, and we bevel this. We just get one five-sided face there, which I'm not too stressed about. Let's pull that offset way down, and maybe just a little bit cleaner. Just a little cleaner. Now, if I take these two vertices and merge them to center, nah, we won't do that. That's looking pretty good, I think. Out of curiosity. Now, I know this probably won't... I mean, the chances of this looking good are slim to nothing. I just really want to kind of play for just a minute. Take my segments and set them up to 2. That should probably kind of help destroy that corner. Not really, but it does give us this nasty thing right here that we don't really want. Could probably clean that up. Let's see, we could delete out this edge and this edge. We could grab... I'm experimenting for just a minute. We'll grab the split polygon tool, could split that right down the middle, and then split that, which turns that into 2 quads anyways. And, oh, that's not too bad. Still a little bit of a sharp corner you can kind of feel right there, which, if I made this whole thing a little more planar, would probably fix up quite a bit. I'll leave that for the time being, and then later on, if I change my mind about how it looks, I'll come back and make some adjustments. Also, we could try, since we have that little triangle there, we could split that in through here, and that makes a tight little corner right inside there that looks pretty sharp from back here. I don't really have a problem with it right now. We'll leave it, and then later on, if I come back to it or I notice it, like you can kind of see it right now from this angle. So keep that in mind before you consign yourself to leaving something like that in place. I'm going to go ahead and undo. I'm not going to call that a failed experiment just yet, but I'll put the idea in park. I'm going to also undo this bevel, because I also want to try one more thing, which is to bevel all of this at the same time, because I want to put a little bit of a bevel here so it looks like a little more like 2 separate objects. Let's bevel that. That's already a pretty tight bevel. And that's not too bad. Yeah, I think we can actually work with that. The corner is a little bit round, but I don't mind that too much. I think that's going to work out just fine in our case. So the other thing I'd like to do is, now that we've drawn so much attention to this crease, let's make sure that crease looks really nice and is rounded very well. Okay. Now, because I've gone and looked at another area, it looks like there may be some flattening over here that I could look at. Okay. Pretty cool. Now, let's take just a second and let's put in some more of those thickness edges that we were lacking before. I'm going to temporarily add this edge into the whole thickness edge calculation for the time being, even though I'll probably have to make some adjustments to that when I create the crevice in between those two pieces. Let's go to wireframe view, make this a little easier. We can go ahead and put thickness edges back here to just kind of tighten up some of the geometry back there. Now, probably don't even need to worry about these too much, come to think of it, because they're just tucked right into a piece of geometry. So let me just unselect all of those. I think this is all we need. So let's go ahead and extrude edges, and I'll push these down in local Z. And how far are we going to go with these? So shade up the view for just a moment. Actually, that was a pretty good guess, because these are already lining up really well, and that's probably the biggest thing I was shooting for. Okay, so let's grab vertices right here, frame up on these for just a moment. And if you have all these other pieces of geometry and they're getting in your way, do remember that good old isolate select. We'll go ahead and auto-load new objects just to be safe in case we create anything. That's just a habit that I turn that on. And let's see. We have this vertex here, which we'll need to snap over. So let's set our move tool over to world mode. Snap, merge. Okay, looks good. All of this is looking pretty good. We can maybe come in here and just clean this up a little bit. Now I'm going to do just something real quick. We'll go ahead and switch off view selected for just a moment. I'll hit Shift tilde so we see both the smooth and the high-res models. Grab them both at the same time, and then let's turn isolate select back on so that I can toggle between these two and still see them both. Okay, so this is a good start on this piece. I would like to now go ahead and put the little crevice back in up here now that I've taken it out a couple of times. So maybe I should start by removing that just for now, and we'll make sure that it's gone back here as well. Now we'll grab each of these faces again. Let's extrude them, just push them down in Z world. Now how far down are we going to go? Probably gauge that by looking at the smooth mesh. Wow, maybe not that far. Right there's not too bad. And we're probably going to end up beveling it anyways. to clean things up. Let's go ahead for the sake of our geometry, and we'll delete out the end faces on these extrusions, like so. And I'm also going to grab our split edge ring tool, make a split down the middle of each of these faces. This is, of course, just so we can merge some vertices. Let's go ahead and do that now. So we'll switch over to vertex. Let me frame up on this one little vert all by his lonesome. And we'll snap him right over like so. Snap this one over to his corresponding vertex. We'll grab all four of them, merge, and they become two, which is excellent. Immediately, let's go ahead and grab the append to polygon tool, and we'll close in this little gap. Check it out in smooth, and you can kind of see what that's doing, which is exactly what we want for now. Even though it is a little bit over-smoothed on the corners, that's fine. Let's go back and get vertices. I'll frame up on these two. You can probably just do a merge to center, and it'll work just fine. And merge to center. Oh, didn't mean to chamfer that. I need to go to object mode, shift right mouse, append to polygon tool, and kaboom. So there you go. Now everything is in place, but over smooth. And how do we solve the over smoothing problem, kiddies? We bevel. So let's grab some edges to bevel. We want this edge all the way down, and we want this edge all the way down. This edge, we can go ahead and bevel this one, so we get kind of a joint across there. I'm going to split off in two directions. This direction will go all the way around. We'll bevel this corner. Send this all the way down the shape. We'll get this corner. Send this piece down. And that's a border, so we probably don't need to worry about that at all. And now, let's just go along the top. Now, I don't think for the time being that I will bevel the inside edges of this crevice, this little trench. I don't think we'll need that. We'll just get the top edges for now. And that should create the look that we're going for. It looks like there may be we might want to go through and straighten this up at some point. We can do that after we get done beveling. I just have to select a couple more vertices on either side. Alright, so we bevel those edges, and the bevels are huge. They don't look too bad, though, all things considered. We will tighten them up just a little bit, so we'll take that offset, bleed it down. That looks pretty good. Now let's take just a moment, and we'll fly this thing like the Death Star trench, and clean it up. Looks pretty good. That looks pretty good. Looks like we have a little bit of a hitch up here. And probably just take these verts here at the very end and straighten those out. Slide that back a little bit. Got a pinch here, and I wonder what that's all about. Oh, look, we probably grabbed an edge we didn't mean to, and we beveled it. Easiest way to fix this, because we don't want to undo, is just merge some verts. Whoops, just you guys. There you go. A little bit of denting up in here, maybe. I'll set our move tool back to normal for just a moment. Okay, not bad, and well, I'm not too worried about that. That's all up under the inside of the wing. Let's go ahead and show the rest of our geometry. and start looking at this in relation to the other pieces of our car. Now, it'd probably be a good idea to maybe add a little more rounding to this piece here along the top. So let's go ahead and do that now. Of course, we're already in normal mode, which is the perfect tool for that. Whoops, I probably over-selected there and noticed that our manipulator was off by a little bit. Okay. Yeah, it looks a little bit better. It's catching the highlight a little more nicely. Switch over to world mode for this particular row, and we'll go over to our smooth version, and let's frame up. We get that relative altitude set up. We'll butt these up against one another. Pull this up just a little bit. Okay, so I think that's looking pretty sharp. So, yeah, I think with that, that's going to take care of the entire roof area, well, this area plus a couple more parts. So I think that'll wrap it up for this video. Thanks a lot.